Hello, and welcome to Standing Strong for Marriages. Thanks for stopping by.
Just thanks for joining me. We've done a lot of work in the past on book reviews and the technical work in Greek, trying to ascertain what is the end of the road, the final sort of concluding point that we should all come up with as far as how to respond to divorce. Since I've already talked about that for a while, there's going to be some other things I think that are helpful to look at. So I'm going to tell a story about going to Winter Jam 2026 recently, which was a sort of a Christian rock and roll venue that came to my city, and I'll give you some insights on that. And then the big thing that I want to try to lay out is something that I wish I would have known as a younger man. Prior to coming into marriage, I felt like I did a pretty good job trying to read books like Love and Respect and other sort of like marriage books in order to I honestly really always had this deep desire to be like the best husband I could be. So if I came across something, I was like, okay, if this is recommended to me, I'm going to really put my heart and my soul into it. Sometimes I came to realize that things do not always work in the way that they are presented to me. And so I wanted to definitely talk about, I think, the conundrum that husbands find themselves in. And I'll try to lay out why I think that husbands should actually sort of allow things to go in a bad direction, given the other options that they have. And I was never presented this framework before. So it's sort of something like, husband, should you at any time, if you're forced to, abandon what you think is best and your convictions and maybe even some of your theology in order to keep like the relationship patched up if your spouse starts to veer off into some weird thing? How far down that road should you go with them is maybe one way to say it in the form of a question. Or like, how deep into the darkness are you going to allow them to drag you until you are faced with like very, very difficult options, none of which are good. Let's move on to the second topic, which I think is really interesting. I was chatting with my folks recently, and we were talking about romantic love, and we were talking about whether or not soulmates are real. And then we ended up talking about essentially what I want to get to is the conundrum of husbands to essentially ask themselves, is it wisdom and a good idea to disobey his convictions? So I'll give you an example, but first, I'd like to lay out like a basic metaphor. I've been using the metaphor when I was talking with them about a car. Most cars, not all, have a temperature gauge, right? So it tells you the heat of the engine and whether basically the cooling system, the radiator, and everything else is working properly. If you overheat your engine, it's very possible that you can cause serious engine damage. Usually, you're going to cook the seals where this piece of metal meets, and so you're going to blow your head gasket, the seal that connects the head to the block. And this is ultra expensive, especially if you're a Subaru driver. It's going to be an engine-out job, it sounds like, most of the time. So you do not want this to happen. And what I wished, this is one of the things I really want to say, I wished someone would have given me a couple mental models before I got married. That basically one of my jobs as a husband is to basically keep an eye on the temperature gauge of my wife. And not temperature, but basically her contentment and happiness level. That one of the jobs that a husband, I think now, should see himself as a critical responsibility is to basically keep a good measure on what's going on with his wife. And if things are good, then, and it's in the middle, then you can like basically proceed, I think, as you would according to your convictions. The problem becomes is if she starts to complain and fight with you a lot, or starts to become, let's say, like disrespectful or other warning signs, other red flags. This is basically a sign that the temperature gauge is now getting to a critical point, and that something soon will break unless things are averted and the happiness gauge is like brought back into the middle sector. Now, I've argued against happy wife, happy life before. I think it's an insane, immature idea that we are given. I think it's immature in the sense that it says that a wife cannot manage her own emotions. I think that's blatantly false. and that she should not be expected to. The reason it's false is because if she's a Christian, one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. This applies for men too, but I mean, you don't hear men going around telling each other like, if you're not happy, just divorce her, bro. But women tell this stuff to each other in the church. I've seen it happen. So it's like, this is observably false. However, I'm now going to say, essentially, it is real. The happiness gauge is real, and it's something that husbands need to manage. Isn't that the exact opposite of what I just said? How can I hold both these things true at the same time? I would say that I added the second part on later, this management sort of mindset, in the last 5 years, simply because I think that is the reality of things. That in general, people can sort of like put up with some level of unhappiness, and they can kind of suffer along with it for a while, but eventually people break. And that there's this very, very, very powerful thing in life, which I ran into, and that I think I realized is pretty much true of everybody, that we have these certain dreams and desires in our minds, and any person who kind of expects to be headed in that direction or thought that their life would turn out this way, and if you're the husband in this relationship, and if your wife isn't either hitting her goals or sees a clear trajectory that in 2, 3, some reasonable short period of number of years, that she'll be like hitting what she expected her life would be like and then surpassing it, brothers, I'm telling you, you are going to have a real, real problem on your hands. Let me give it to you like this. One of the examples I used, I've toyed around this idea for a long time. Let's say a husband is a good man. He is a good man. He is a good Christian man. He prays. He's good at parenting. He works hard. He goes out and he brings home X number of dollars. He takes care of the car. He takes care of himself. He's demonstrating the fruits of the Spirit. But in terms of work, he has certain ideas like we need to put X number of dollars away because there's no pension funds anymore. And so we're going to have to build our own 401ks. And we need to be putting money aside for kids in their college, and et cetera, et cetera. So he makes the decision sort of that in his mind, in order for this to all make sense for now anyways, he's gonna put his family in like a bad neighborhood or like a trailer park. I think trailer park is a trigger point for middle-class, college-educated people where it's sort of some point of it equates to failure. Yeah. Now, is there anything in the Bible that says that, husbands and wives can only love each other if they live in a middle-class lifestyle? No, there's nothing that says that. Is there anything in the Bible that says a marriage cannot prosper and function well in a trailer park? No, there's nothing in the scriptures that I can find that says that. Is there anything that you can find? If so, comment about it. But what happens is people have these ideas about how their life is supposed to go, right? And they have these class expectations. And so if you, husbands, marry a college-educated woman, or a woman who came from a middle-class background and is used to having, certain vacations every year, and she likes to go skiing, and she wants to get new clothes each season, and, whatever. I don't know, go out to eat, and we won't get into what all the requirements are to maintain a romantic relationship, but that's mostly a lot of money. If those are her expectations and you do not provide those for her, then you have not sinned, brothers, but she is going to treat you badly eventually. I believe this. Yeah. Because there's something inside of us where it's like, I don't know, it's like people feel like they're suffering or something like this. And I think the way it turns out in most women's minds is like, not like my husband's trying well and God told me that godliness with contentment is great gain, and so I'm going to be content with what God gave me. Very few women are taught to believe that, and I'm going to do like a male version of this as well, so I'm not just going to like heap trouble on women. But this is hard. This is hard for women, even women who believe that know that that's a Bible verse, that believe on some level that God is their provider, that God gave her husband, and that anybody making I think it is more than $33,000 US per year is in the top 1% of all people globally. So she's already in the top 1%, but it just doesn't work like that. And guys, I just want to make clear to you that you separate just your pure Christianity stuff from real life expectations and the way that human psychology actually works. And then recognize that it's true in you as well. So I had a second story to try to illustrate this. It's not about money. It's about how the house is organized. So I've talked to a lot of people in the last 10 years, right? And I talked to this guy. He basically told me his story at one point. And he said that, basically he was like a traditional-minded man. He looked at the scriptures and he tried to understand what the scriptures had in mind for the best way to run a family. Because he took God seriously, and he also thought that there's dysfunction that comes in the household if things are done in a non-biblical way. So he talked to his fiancée during their engagement, and he said, okay, this is my mindset. He said, basically, there's a ton of responsibilities that are put on husbands to make decisions and research all these like things that are super hard to understand. Is it better to move to Florida or California? Should we vote this way or that way? Should we put kids in private school or public school? Should we give our kids vitamins or not? Should we vaccinate our kids or not? Should we, should I go in this career path or not? Is now a good time to buy a house or not? Should we take this risk or should we play it safe? The way that he looked at it, he said that this is a huge task. This is a lot of work. This is a huge burden that somebody has to take. If you put a family in a situation where everything goes to basically be in some long, drawn-out debate on every issue, it does two things. It puts a lot of weight on the wife, and two, it's very slow, and it takes a ton of time is consumed just in decision-making. So he laid this out to her, and she said, you know what? Like, I appreciate that you want to, like, serve our family and serve me in this way. And she said, I also see what you're talking about. She said she saw that in the scriptures, the woman was supposed to, unless there was, like, an area of sin, rather than fight with her husband all the time and always get her way, she said it's better and it's more harmonious on these, like, issues that are, like, wisdom decisions, to let the husband, who's a smart guy and a prayerful man and led by the Lord, so it's the Lord and then the husband and then the wife and then the children, that she's going to have plenty on her plate dealing with these children, and that she doesn't have to be in on every meeting for every decision that's made in the course of the family, and that she saw her role as one of a helpmate, support, not to be argumentative or drag him down or be a complainer when things don't go well. That obviously what would happen anyway is if, the husband, let's say, chose to move to Florida over California, and things don't turn out so well in Florida, like, who does that land on ultimately? Ultimately, she's like going to turn to him and be like, this isn't working, I'm not happy with this situation. And obviously, he's the one that has to say, I was wrong. I did my research. There's like a imperfect information situation. Who knows how California would have turned out, but I chose, to take us to Florida. It ended up being turned out badly. Didn't work out. That's going to, ultimately sort of, in certain ways, fall on him. Yeah. And so that's part of the burden. So she said, that's fine. She said, this is great. Like 2 years into the relationship, she decided that while she agreed to that during the engagement period, she changed her mind. She changed her mind that it was difficult and she didn't like it, and it was too much like whatever the terms were, and she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to do it anymore. And, she really started to cause a lot more fights, and then ultimately sabotage the marriage and went down the divorce lifestyle road. And that's kind of where they are right now. And it's like, well, I'll couch this question and say, is there anything that the husband could have done differently? Once he understood that she had changed her mind, not that she's going to come out straight out and tell him that, but once he starts to see basically like the temperature gauge start to push up, and it's starting to get to a critical thing where she's really becoming unpleasant, unhappy, ungrateful, unappreciative, complaining. You're starting to run into this sort of like Israelites in the desert type of situation. And they're really getting, they're getting the complaining going pretty big time, as well as other nonverbal protests and problems and all this stuff. Is there anything a husband can do? Let me give you one more story. I'll make this one brief, and then we'll talk about what I think husbands can do, I was never told this before. A lot of couples fight over money. I recently, was that recent? I heard a story basically of a wife that wanted to upgrade apartments, and that their family had grown. They had 2 kids, and things were cramped, and so there was this sort of this is not a good space and we need more space. There was a money constraint. Everyone knew about it. He knew about it. She knew about it. But an apartment came up that was larger. And so the idea was, let's go and talk to the company and see if we can get it. So they got approved for it. And so then the decision was very obvious. They were already in debt before in the old place, and the new place was clearly more expensive. What are your options as a husband in this point? There's a couple things that I used to believe in that I don't believe in. I used to believe that you could sit down with somebody who was making a bad decision, whether sinful or not. Let's not put those labels on these things, but just say, regardless, can you ever go to somebody and tell them, give them advice about their own life and their own thinking and their own values and say, my friend, my spouse, my brother, biological, my brother-in-law, my friend from work, my boss, this doesn't seem to be a very good idea. I think we should do something else. My current belief is that I give the probability of this working nearly zero, that people will listen to you. I think the problems are with it is too. If you're a husband and you obviously are in a budgetary money shortage problem, yet your wife is saying, I expect to be living at this level. I've been here, I've been patient, I've been content, I'm out of contentment, I'm out of patience, I'm ready to get us and the family out of here pronto, and we need to be over here at this other, better level. That's my expectation. I've made it clear. This is what I want. Go get the money, right? That's essentially what she's saying. She's going to throw caution to the wind. If you come back to her as a husband and you say, look, here are the numbers, what I think happens is she gets super pissed off. Yeah, why? Because you're essentially making a numerical argument against what she's already decided in her heart is her expectations for how her life should be. So one, you're telling her that she's either A, falling short in spirituality of contentment, or B, I think the way it's taken if you lay out an argument, whether a budget or some other set of ideas that all sum to a verbal argument, that you people basically feel like you've insulted their intelligence. That you basically especially if you're successful in your argument, the more successful you are, the worse that it goes for you, in fact. Again, this is when people have already decided in their minds this is what they want, this is what they need, and this is what they require. If you prove to them, and numbers is a great argument, very hard to argue with, that we just don't got it, honey. The income is not going to be equal to the outputs required to hit this level of lifestyle. She is going to turn it back on you. She is going to say, whether she says it out loud or not, she is going to say something like, I can't believe I married this loser. He's and just the derogatory stuff. I'm not saying she should do that, but I'm saying that's what happens. That's how people are. If you disappoint them, you underdeliver, they have to find some outlet for their pain, and they really have two choices. One, they need to grow spiritually, and they're not digging in deep enough to the Lord, and they're failing on a spiritual level. Very rarely does that happen once people hit their brink, right? Usually what happens is people look for somebody to blame. And for women, it's typically husbands. I'm just telling you. I'm not trying to make women out to be anything bad. And I'll tell you that I think husbands are the exact same way. Yeah, and I realized to the degree that this also was how I operated. There were certain dreams that I really, really had in my life. And when I found that they were not going to be we probably weren't going to be hitting those, it was something like grief. I didn't even really realize I was grieving. But that's basically what people are doing. They're in some sort of grief psychological state. And it's very hard to talk numbers with them or explain to them about, delayed satisfaction and long-term, planning for, I don't know if it's the same as hard-heartedness, but I think it's in the conversation where something happens with people. And I just think it's worth talking about and laying out and preparing husbands for. So I'll skip. You get the ideas about the numbers. If you argue with her, she's going to double down. She's going to get more upset. So what do? The numbers is an easy example because basically what you have to do is defy logic. That's one of your options as a husband. And what I want to explore is, should you do that? I used to say, no, of course not. What you should do is you should make the clear and responsible argument about money and numbers and not go along with her on that, and expect her to be agreeable and reasonable and understanding and compassionate and a helpmate and helpful and supportive and I appreciate all that you're doing and I know that one day we'll get there and go to prayer. This is, I would say, and unreasonable expectations for husbands to have on the most part, unless your wife is like a very mature believer. And this is part of measuring who is this person and where is their temperature gauge at on the happiness and contentment level. And people are works in progress, you know. They are not all going to be, even now, like we are not all going to be able to completely pull off contentment and trust and faith in God through hard times and suffering. So what I think husbands should do is basically the best strategy out of a bunch of terrible options, right? You could stay in the low-priced apartment complex and basically be treated by your wife badly for an indefinite amount of time, right? And you could hope that maybe she like eventually gets over it. That's not like an altogether bad problem, but you are going to put the bullseye right on you because you are the one standing in the way. You are literally saying, if you do that, you know, you better get ready for all the like, you're so controlling, like you are such a, all these like accusations, because this is how the woman is going to feel, that you're like imprisoning her in some like suboptimal lifestyle and you are the problem. And if you would just be more willing to figure out a way, then, you know, she wouldn't have to like correct you and you know, like point out all your flaws on the regular. So, but you could do that. You could do that and you could see how that works. If you come to the realization that that is really becoming miserable and not a long-term win, then I think the other option that you should consider is to abandon all your financial wisdom. And this is, I wouldn't have said this when I was married. I wouldn't have said this even 5 years ago, but now I think I'll say it. There is an option before you, and I think it can be an option worth taking, which is basically sacrifice your own ideas about money and the wisdom of God, you know, in some senses, because you're really in a catch-22. You're basically like in this emergency situation. And I think the best thing to do is say, out loud, you don't agree with this path, but that you respect your wife as like a person, an autonomous person who has certain ideas, and like if she is really insistent that she thinks that this is the best future and that this is the way that she wants to try to live out her faith, basically like make the move up in social mobility and then basically put it off on God or put it off on the husband or other people and maybe in the family to like make up the difference. If that's the plan she wants to do, then say, I don't think this is a good idea, but I love you, and like let's see how it goes. Even if he's like very, very confident that this is going to lead to an eviction. Why would you do this? Like, why would you basically allow such a terrible thing to go on? And can you do that as a husband in good faith? And I think you should. I think you should just do that. If you tried the first one and said no, and if she's still going to fight you, then say, okay, I don't think this is a good idea, but, you know, let's see. If you think this is the path we should go, then I'm willing to go that way with you. And then just see how far they will just drag you into the darkness, right? Which is not going to be easy. But basically what's going to happen is you are going to, like this couple, well, they were obviously going to right off the bat face moving expenses. And then on the very first month, they're going to be in a huge money shortage. So within 30 days, you know, the stuff is going to hit the fan. And then I think that's the time when the husband turns to the wife and says like, well, we are not going to be able to afford our utilities. You know, like this is a great place, a lot more space, but it's pretty cold, you know, or it's pretty dark. And say like, what do you think we should do? Now this goes counter to all of the marriage books, right? The John Piper, all the marriage books, right? They always tell us that the husband is supposed to be the leader. And for most of my life, I would say the husband has now like abdicated his responsibility, but I wouldn't say that anymore. Now I would say the husband is redefined how he is basically addressing things. And he's sort of, I mean, he's going to be the leader of the family. The setup from God, husband, wife, children, that hierarchy is not going to change no matter, you know, what. Like that's just how it works. So he doesn't need to like freak out and be like, oh, I'm like losing my leadership or something. Like, no, but he's changed in the way he's doing it. He's now saying, look, if you really think, I mean, if you're willing to like really fight me every day on this like cheaper apartment thing, then like let's go and I'm fine. Like let's see how this other plan goes. And when it, you know, fantastically fails, there's going to be a lot of like learning that happens. And of course, like if she blamed him before in the cheap apartment, she's definitely going to come back and put it on him in the expensive apartment. And what the husband needs to do is basically like just know that all of this is coming and just don't get rattled. Basically, guys, like don't get rattled when you're in this situation. And just take the whole thing as people grow. Your wife will grow over the course of your marriage, and sometimes she will grow maybe the most through failure, right? And so if she, does this whole experiment and it doesn't work out, then you can basically sit there with her, and if she's going to really heap it on you, which she probably will, then you got to realize like this was the best option, before you. Now, I think what happens in a lot of situations is married men somehow end up like earning more than unmarried men because this is very commonly what happens, and people are not able to like constrain their desires or constrain their spending habits or their mental models of achieving middle class or upper middle class or whatever the sociological class that is in people's minds. It's very hard to constrain. No doubt about that. It's way bigger than I thought it was 5-10 years ago. It is huge for people. It drives them in a massive way, and I don't hear people talk about it very often. So hopefully the husband will be, he'll pray, his wife will pray. They'll be in this even worse situation than they're in before. And I think that the best strategy for men is just to say, we're in this disaster now, and, if he can't go get more money, I mean, it's going to be a terrible period for everybody, right? But your goal in this period of catastrophe is basically not to become your wife's enemy, right? To basically set yourself up as someone who was like trying to be supportive of her, and that she like made a bad decision, like you still love her, right? And don't say it like so much like you might have to say it like we made a bad decision or this didn't work, or sort of make it in a way where she can confront her own bad decision and lack of wisdom on her own time, in her own way, in private. And so try to keep it like as unaccusatory as possible, and to avoid just to be ready for the like verbal tongue lashing that you're going to get, and the fights and all that stuff. And then just realize like this is all okay. I don't have to be upset about it because this isn't about me. It's not about my leadership. It's not about my godliness. It's just my wife is coming to terms with the difference between her expectations and the way the world really works. And she's coming to terms with her, lack of spiritual maturity and contentment. And it's very, very disruptive. But that's part of being married. That's part of allowing people to grow in their faith. And so as a husband, just sit back, keep it together, try to make more money if you can, go on your knees, pray, be kind to her, don't return evil with evil, but just turn evil, with good. Just be nice to her. She's struggling, and don't take it personally, and you'll be fine. Like maybe you'll get evicted and then you'll live somewhere else, or maybe you'll run up a big amount of debt and that'll hang over your head for a long time. But eventually, like, your choice is between like a marital explosion or debt. If you're going to take the choice between the two, go with the debt. Go with the debt. It's not the best of the best. It's not optimal. It's not the wisdom of the Proverbs. But you're not dealing in like these perfect, cut and dry, simple situations. You're dealing with people who are like maturing and have sin issues and have all these other issues. And so that is what I would say. I guess all I'll say is I try not to, as a content creator, like share much personally about the relationship that I have with my wife. But I will say that there were like things that happened to me where I was in this situation where I had in my mind that like these are sort of must-have things, these are sort of expectations, these are dreams, these are passions, these are goals, for me. And when I found that like it seemed like that there was a huge resistance, to this, and that these things were basically going to die on the vine. That is really not easy. That was very, very hard. I think using the term like grieving is actually something that no one ever told me. You're going to get married and you're going to have to grieve as you watch some dreams die. Are you ready to do that? Are you ready to do that, Brian? No one ever told me. There was no books that talked like that. It was like working together, making compromises, like all this stuff, But none of the books ever talked about like, dear ladies, like, here's how to be a loving and supporting wife during the 10 years in the trailer park. I mean, there's no chapters on that, or find a comparable for a husband, right? And, I guess maybe it could be, let's say, like we didn't have children, so let's say we could use the example of, what is it, postpartum depression. Dear husbands, like, what happens if you are faced with some like ultra suboptimal postpartum depression situation for a long time? Yeah, and like there's nothing you can do and you're completely powerless against it, and your wife is powerless against it, and pick your tragedy in marriage, right? But this is real life. People get laid off. I mean, as you guys know. But the thing that I just want to say, this isn't commonly taught, I don't feel like, to husbands, which is basically like, take your theology or take your passions, your beliefs, your central ideas about the way things are supposed to go, and just chuck it out of the window and be like, no, I mean, how can I do that? You're going to feel like, I cannot betray God like that. God told me that this is, like, let's go back to the guy with the, pick your one, either financial responsibility or ordering the house in a God-honoring way. In either of those situations, the husband who says, all right, let's do this thing that I think is an ultra bad idea, he's basically like suspending these core Christian beliefs. And you have to have some like rationale in order to do that. And the best one that I can think of is like, give your wife the space and the opportunity to make some super dumb decisions. And let her be a human being. Let her learn from her mistakes. And let her go through the hurt and the whole mental evaluation process of where does her joy come from? Where did she get these requirements, must-haves? And if she has to grieve them, or obviously in the apartment example, the couple is probably in worse shape after moving to a place that now they were even further overextended, and the number of debts they owed didn't increase, they expanded. So the health of the marriage on the financial terms became worse. And so obviously, like, that's a recoverable event, right? What you're trying to do is avoid the unrecoverable events. And the unrecoverable event, I think, is like forcing your wife into something that she hates without giving her any options, as long as she's under some delusion, some disconnect of the reality of dollars and cents. She's a smart person. It's like an emotional dream thing that is the crisis that's going on with her. That's why I say you can't point out to her that this is a stupid idea and it's not going to work by bringing out a Excel sheet with a budget. That's not what this is about. She's smart enough to understand that she's broke now. She's going to be even more broke if she goes on to something better. But people are funny like that, People are funny like that. I mean, I'm the same way. I'm not any different than these stories that I laid out. And it's really helpful to realize that as soon as you can, which is why I want to put this together and share it with you guys. What do y'all think? Are there other similar things that you've lived through, husbands? Did you kind of stand firm and say, like, no, we are going to stay in this situation that my wife hates? And how did that turn out? Did she self-correct eventually, or how did you manage that time when you were public enemy number one in her eyes? How long do you think you would stick with that strategy? These are sort of like wisdom questions, right? There's no easy answers in these situations, but they are ultra common. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for joining me on Staying Strong for Marriages. Hey, the scriptures, actually, I was kind of convicted recently. I'm in between jobs, so I am going to ask for donations. The scriptures say, ask and you will receive. So I ask God a lot. God, I'd like to get this job or that job, this other job. And I've just been in a rough season. So I will say, plus I'm excited about this, and I think some donations would also keep me going in the ministry and things like that. I'll probably keep going in some regard, one way or the other, but I'll be blessed if you've been blessed by this information and you want to continue to help content creators who are trying to push back about these horrendous divorce rates and what I'd say is basically the abuse of children. I don't mean to say that in a bad way. If you were tricked into a divorce lifestyle or something. But we want to try to help people before they do like serious damage to their kids and themselves and their spouses. And so I know some people hate it. I know some people hate it. I just feel like I need to say that Jesus talked, about a lot of things, and a lot of people were upset with him about the things he said. Even when he did good things, even when he healed people, he seemed to be like a pretty offensive person. And I got to tell you, I've definitely been offended by the standards that he seems to have put together on couples. And I think over time, in my own way, similar to the story I've been talking about, it took me time to grow and progress and trust him and think about, are these really good rules? To ask people to respect the vows that they made when they got married for life. It's not an easy question to grapple with. And so I understand if people get upset, that's fine. That's fine. We're allowed to get upset, just we shouldn't sin in our anger. So I'll leave it there. But God bless you guys. Thanks so much. You can find links, all kinds of content. I'm happy to see that there's more content creators. And it's been a joy to talk to some of you guys calling in from the UK. So until next time, thanks so much for joining me and staying strong for marriages. We'll talk to you next time.